After we got engaged, I found out that Jeremy Anderson had a perfectly polished, well-connected female secretary. At every dinner, every reception, Jeremy took her along. He said he didn't want me to get too tired. At the banquet, everyone praised them for being a perfect match, a talented man and a beautiful woman, born for each other. Jeremy only smiled without saying a word. I stood off to the side, dusty and out of place, clutching the thermal lunch jar in my hands, not knowing what to do. Until I heard David Arnold's voice behind me, lazy and a little unruly. A man who doesn't behave should be replaced. Or, you could take a look at me. When I walked into the hall, that was when I realized. Jeremy Anderson's company was holding a reception today. To celebrate a successful new product launch, they'd invited a lot of industry big shots. Annie was wearing a shimmering haute couture gown, openly holding Jeremy's arm. The two of them together had a kind of hard-to-describe harmony and visual pleasure. People around them kept complimenting. President Anderson is mature and steady, and his fiancée is so gentle and pleasant. The two of them are truly made for each other. As they were talking, Annie held the hand Jeremy was using to lift his glass. Her voice was so soft it could make you drunk. Jeremy, your stomach isn't good, better not drink too much. President Anderson is really blessed to have such a virtuous lady at his side. When the two of you get married, you must invite us. Jeremy kept smiling, saying nothing. As if he had completely forgotten. That just 2 months ago, the person who had walked beside him, attending his engagement banquet, was me. Inside the banquet hall it was all fragrance and glitter, clinking glasses and laughter, so lively. Compared with the glamorous crowd inside, I, standing outside the door in my plain clothes, my hair tied back simply with a silk ribbon, because I had come in a hurry, hadn't even had time to do my brows or put on lipstick, looked utterly shabby. Like a beggar woman who had strayed into a palace. The only valuable thing on me was the engagement ring on my hand. What a coincidence. Annie, the Ms. Anderson, being praised in the hall, also had a diamond ring on her hand that looked exactly like mine. During a break, 2 ladies came out to use the restroom and passed by me. President Anderson is so mature and so steady, and he looks a little aloof too. You can tell at a glance he'll be good to his wife. I heard his fiancée's dress tonight was picked with him personally. Ah, I'm so jealous. I couldn't help dropping my gaze to my phone. So Jeremy's working late in his messages was actually accompanying Annie to pick out a dress. That was why he had no time to take wedding photos with me. I sat alone in the bridal shop, looking out the window again and again. And being disappointed again and again. When I couldn't reach Jeremy, and the staff were already hinting that I should go, I could only leave awkwardly. I didn't get his working late message until I got home. I hugged the lunch jar tighter. The coolness of the metal seeped through my clothes and pressed into my skin. When I got home alone, I was immediately met with my mother's sharp scolding. Maya Keller, look at you, you're such a dull thing, what a waste of that face. Men need to be coaxed. Do you know how much effort it took us to climb up to the Anderson family? I pressed my lips together and looked down at the tips of my shoes. Actually, my mother wasn't wrong. Among all the women he could have chosen, they were all from good families, all stunning beauties. But Jeremy chose me and only me. When the atmosphere between us was good, I had once asked Jeremy why he had picked me. He took a sip of red wine and smiled. The first time I saw you, you pricked your finger with a needle. When you lowered your head to suck the blood, my heart hurt. In the romantic, hazy light of that French restaurant, my face grew even redder than the wine in my glass. I really am the quiet, plain type, not the kind who knows how to please men. But if that man is Jeremy, I'm willing to try taking the initiative. Ever since I met Jeremy, he had been looking after me. I have a cold constitution, my hands and feet are often icy. Jeremy would tell the driver to prepare hand warmers in the car. I love embroidery, my family dislikes it. So he bought me a villa by the river and filled it with the embroidery pieces I like. Whenever I went back to the Keller family, I never quite fit in. What they expected of me and the affection they showed me were all on the surface only. After I started dating Jeremy, he would go home with me every month. No matter how urgent the meeting, he would postpone it. At the dinner table, he would pick out the mushrooms and tofu I like and put them in my bowl. Whenever my mother would fawn and say, "Maya must be causing you trouble," Jeremy would take my hand, cold as ice, and place it on the table for all to see. Little bubbles of sweetness would keep rising from the bottom of my heart. I would quietly, secretly hold his hand back, telling him without words that I liked him. When we ate at home, the meals were long, the food would get cold, but the heart was warm. Unlike tonight. The porridge was scalding hot, but my heart was slowly turning cold. After I learned Jeremy was working late, I was afraid his stomach would hurt, so I rushed to make this and bring it to him. Only to find out now. It was unnecessary. The blisters I got from boiling the porridge stung unbearably. I tilted my head up slightly and blinked, forcing the sting in my eyes back down. A messenger came out from the banquet hall. The look in his eyes was full of disdain. Secretary Annie says, for today's occasion, it wouldn't be suitable for you to go in. Jeremy's company staff and his friends didn't know me. Even on our engagement day, it had only been our two families sitting down to a simple meal. Jeremy's explanation was, he didn't want to put private matters on display. Before my mother could even voice her dissatisfaction, Jeremy had already blocked it with a jaw-dropping bride price. But everyone knew Annie. Jeremy's childhood playmate and personal secretary. Her weight in Jeremy's heart was not ordinary. Once, when someone at a dinner table spoke rudely to Annie, Jeremy, in anger, smashed a bottle over the person's head. When people got news that Jeremy was getting engaged, many thought the bride would be Annie. To have your own fiancé have such a close, deep-rooted female secretary. It was like a long thin nail driven into your heart. The pain went on and on and on. I had hinted to Jeremy several times. Did he need me to accompany him to those dinners? At the time, Jeremy had wrapped his arm around my shoulder, his cool lips curling at my ear, pressing a lingering kiss there. Let Annie take care of those things. I don't want you getting tired. Only now do I understand. It wasn't that Jeremy was cherishing me. It was that I wasn't presentable enough. I didn't belong there. I lowered my head and tugged at the corners of my lips, laughing at myself. Seeing me in cheap clothes, head down and silent, the person beside me was even more disdainful. Idle people aren't allowed in here. If you don't leave, I'll call security. I looked up at her, my tone flat. The Chanel on your ear is so fake it hurts to look at. I tossed the thermos into the trash can at the corner. Along with it, I threw away this one-year relationship. In a corner far away from the crowd, I leaned against the cold-tiled wall. The emotion I'd been holding back for so long finally burst out. Silent sobs and choked crying turned into strings of tears, falling one by one at my feet. The nail that had been stuck in my heart for so long was suddenly pulled out. Along with the blood that surged out there was also the rusted, bone-gnawing pain. But that was still better than letting it rot inside. After venting, I slowly calmed down. Suddenly, a voice sounded behind me, lazy, unruly, and just a bit teasing. Auntie, if a man doesn't behave, you should switch him out. So, what do you think of me? I looked around, no one else. He was talking to me. With my eyes puffy and red, I turned around in confusion. It was actually David Arnold. He was leaning against the wall with his arms folded, bright light outlining his clean, handsome features and high-nose bridge, the corners of his lips raised, his peach blossom eyes looking at me with a half-smile. Tsk tisk, you've cried yourself into a sad little frog. Really not a good look. Somehow, I ended up in David's car. I hadn't expected to see him again, and even less expected that he would be Jeremy's nephew. David rested one hand on the steering wheel. At a red light, he held a cigarette between his lips, glanced at me, then put it back. Impressive, Maya. Just a few years and you went from being my little shadow to my little aunt. David's teasing voice echoed in the car. His eyes were dark and unreadable, and every now and then, when he looked at me, there was a faint, hidden emotion. When I turned to look, he put his cheeky expression back on. What's wrong? Seeing me made you mute? I sat in the passenger seat, not sure where to start. When I was in my third year of middle school, there were always some punks on motorcycles in town, waiting at the school gate to rob kids. Come on, little girl, hand over the money and nothing will happen. The money was in my school bag, my fingers were white from gripping it. Seeing the stick so close, I clenched my teeth, closed my eyes, determined to protect the money in the bag like it was fused to my bones. The pain I imagined never came. Instead I heard a sharp crack. The sound of a stick breaking. Curled up in the corner, I opened my eyes. David was standing in front of me, full of menace, and the punks had backed far away. He grabbed me like a little chick, and his usually lazy tone was full of danger. Whoever doesn't want to live, try touching her again. Those punks were afraid of David. But I was afraid they'd retaliate against me. So from then on, every time school was over, I would intentionally or unintentionally follow behind David, not too near, not too far. Over time, it became a habit. I became his little shadow. But youth is too fast, and goodbyes come too easily. Right before the college entrance exams, David suddenly left. Before I could even let the sadness spread, I was recognized back by the Keller family and left the small town I had lived in for over 10 years. When I left, Grandma hunched over, her calloused hands gripping me tight, tears in her eyes, but still smiling like a flower. Dash, you've got such a good temper, they'll definitely treasure you back home. Living in the big city is good, much better than suffering here with this old woman. Outside the car window it was crowded and neon lights flashed. But Grandma, I haven't been doing well at all. My parents don't like me. The double-sided embroidery I carefully sewed, they tossed straight into the trash. My relationships aren't good either. They have so much love, enough to give to many people. I bit my lower lip, eyes burning, and turned halfway toward the window. A clean, cool scent came toward me, mingled with David's body heat. A big black coat was draped over my head. Even his magnetic voice carried a hard-to-describe tenderness. Don't hold it in. I can't see. David knew. I never cry in front of people. So he held up a small, warm, dark space for me. My tears couldn't be held back, they poured out of my eyes. When I got out of the car, my eyes were even more swollen and red than before. David didn't joke about me looking ugly this time. Thanks for today. My throat felt full of sand, my voice hoarse. David gave a lazy smile, lifted his hand like he wanted to ruffle my hair, just like when I used to share my bubble drinks with him. But this time, before his hand even touched a strand of hair, he suddenly pulled it back. David glanced at the house behind me. It was the riverside villa Jeremy had given me. David pressed his lips into a line, inhaled, and exhaled. The moonlight was pale and gray. He was drenched in helplessness and desolation. Maya, does it really have to be him? What did you just say? His voice was too soft, carried away by a sudden gust of wind. I didn't hear it clearly. David didn't repeat it. He shoved his hands into his pockets and used his chin to point at his coat and my hands. The wind's huge. Giving you a ride was asking to get sick. When he finished, he even gave a couple of bitter little laughs. I felt bad. The wind really was strong tonight. I'd thought of washing the coat and then returning it to him. But right now, it seemed I had to return it first. David, remember to drink some cold medicine when you get back. Really, thank you for tonight. If you hadn't been there, He had already walked into the darkness. The only response I got was the faint wave of his hand. I went back into the villa and started packing up my things. Counting them one by one. There really weren't that many things in this house that truly belonged to me. I couldn't even fill one suitcase. The bags, the jewelry, the clothes, all those sky-high embroidery pieces bought at auctions. Those were all from Jeremy. I went upstairs and took out the 2 shirts of Jeremy's from the back of the closet. They had been my birthday gifts to him. On the collar I had embroidered red anthuriums by hand. Back then he had just fully taken over the Anderson family, so it meant great success and rising step by step. Jeremy had accepted them with a big smile, then turned around and put them away in the deepest part of the closet, never to be taken out again. But the striped tie Annie gave him had always been in the most convenient spot. When I left, I put the keys and the engagement ring on the table together. Before getting engaged, I'd used the savings from running my little studio to buy a small apartment. When I got home, it wasn't too late yet. I picked up my phone and called Jeremy. Some things still needed to be made clear. The banquet was a big success, and Jeremy was very pleased. After taking over the company from his father's generation, he had spent 2 years cultivating it carefully. He had finally gone from President Anderson Jr. to the real, rightful President Anderson. He was proud and satisfied. Actually, during the banquet, Jeremy knew Maya had come to find him. But at such a big event, she really wouldn't have fit in. Even without seeing her, he could imagine how she looked. A simple, light-colored outfit, hair tied back, if she was being more formal maybe just light makeup. Very elegant, very lovely, and very Maya. Just like when he first met her. Among all those heavily made-up women he'd met on blind dates, only she had blushed so hard her eyes didn't know where to look. An unworldly kind of beauty. His heart had been moved, yes. But some people just couldn't be put on stage. Maya had her own studio, doing handmade embroidery. At the end of a family dinner once, Jeremy overheard a few aunts whispering. Calling it an embroidery artist sounds nice, but at the end of the day she's just doing needlework, isn't she? I really don't know what Jeremy was thinking, choosing her of all people. And she's so quiet, barely says a few words. For Jeremy to make it this far in the family power struggle hadn't been easy. There was indeed a moment when Jeremy regretted his impulsiveness. If he could have found a smooth, capable wife, someone who could help and elevate him, it would have made things much easier. Not like now. Fortunately, Annie had always been by his side. Annie had always carried herself as if she were the fiancée. Jeremy had always known that. At the very beginning, he did feel a little guilty toward Maya. Later, watching Annie, wearing the future Mrs. Anderson aura, handle everything with ease and perfection, and knowing that Maya probably couldn't do any of that, the faint guilt in his heart vanished without a trace. Compared with banquets, Maya really did seem to prefer staying by herself with her threads and needles, making things that were of no use. Since she liked it, he would just buy 1 or 2 pieces from her, and count it as humoring her. His friends had joked and reminded Jeremy that enjoying the best of both worlds might set his backyard on fire. Jeremy drained his red wine in one go and said, very confident, "Fire? Maya? She doesn't have that in her." In Jeremy's eyes, Maya was like a little rabbit, so obedient, never interfering with him. Even when she got upset, she was soft about it. A couple of words of coaxing and she was fine. Besides, Maya still had those money-grubbing parents. Even if she really found out about what was going on outside, so what? Jeremy's POV. Jeremy stared at the nephew in front of him, and the headache from the alcohol got worse. David was his own blood nephew. He took his mother's last name, Arnold, and wasn't much younger than Jeremy himself. Jeremy had always disapproved of his own brother. Always wearing an apron, circling around his wife, and even smiling as he said that since his wife had suffered to give birth, it was only right the child take her surname. Even David had always lived with his maternal family. Aside from holidays, they almost never met. That night, David suddenly barged into Jeremy's room. Annie, half-dressed, was lying on the bed. The savagery and fury in David's eyes looked like he was about to tear someone apart. The ornaments and the table lamp around them were smashed to pieces in an instant. In the chaos, Annie hadn't even managed to put her clothes on properly before fleeing in a hurry. David stood at the doorway looking down on him. He tossed out just a few light-sounding sentences and made Jeremy panic. "Uncle, you really can stomach anything. If Grandpa finds out, you think you can still sit steady in that President Anderson seat?" The old Mr. Anderson was upright and strict. He had always hated to see his descendants messing around. "David, Annie and I aren't what you think." Looking at David, who seemed angry for no clear reason, Jeremy was halfway through explaining when his phone rang. Jeremy. On the other end was Maya. Her voice was soft and gentle, but there was also a power in it that could calm people down, the same voice that had smoothed away Jeremy's irritability and fatigue countless times. "Maya, I'm dealing with something right now. I'll call you back in a bit." Jeremy looked at the David in front of him and felt this was a headache. "Jeremy, let's break up. Annie is more suitable than me for the position of Mrs. Anderson, I believe you think so too. Everything you gave me, I've left in the Riverside villa. The keys are on the table. Jeremy, let's part nicely. I wish you happiness." In the quiet room, only Maya's voice kept echoing. It wasn't loud, but it floated cleanly into everyone's ears. It wasn't until the call was hung up that Jeremy snapped out of it. Maya had actually broken up with him. Jeremy stared blankly for a moment, then laughed in anger. What was this? A little tantrum? Because he hadn't let her attend the banquet tonight? He had spoiled her so much she was becoming a little unruly. Fine, break up. Let her cool off for a while. She'd come back to him obediently later anyway. David's anger, on the other hand, dissipated quickly. When the call ended, David lowered his head, arms folded, and actually let out a soft laugh. Because of David's maternal side of the family, Jeremy couldn't vent his anger. After weighing it, he said, "Don't tell Grandpa about tonight. I'm afraid it'll be too much for his health." "Relax, Uncle. I'm not that bored." With that, David whistled and went downstairs. I didn't have time to sit and mourn a lost relationship. The Lost Intangible Heritage embroidery competition sent me an invitation. They invited me to compete. It was my first time entering a national-level competition. It was also recognition of my work. After the excitement, the heavy pressure rushed in too. I prepared carefully and worked through the night. Designing, sketching, stretching the fabric, matching threads. If I wasn't satisfied, I tore it and started over. Over and over, challenging different designs, different techniques. When David suddenly appeared at my door, I thought I was seeing things from overwork. "Maya, my coat's dirty. What do I do?" The black coat that had once given me a small piece of dignity was thrown back into my arms again. "There, at the collar, looks like there's your snot." I turned the coat inside out and back again, trailing after David and muttering under my breath. "Nonsense. Where's the snot?" David looked around the house, and finally the smile at his lips faded. His gaze fell heavily on my face. "Maya, are you actually treating yourself like a giant panda? You think you're so rare you don't need to sleep?" Before he even finished, my vision suddenly went white, and I couldn't find a footing under my feet. "Maya! Maya!" I couldn't respond to his panicked calling. I only remembered that I fell into a hug that was so warm it was almost unreal. The faint fresh scent at the tip of my nose. It was so comfortable, so reassuring. When I woke up again, it was completely dark outside. David had pulled a chair to the side of the bed and was sleeping there, head propped up. Under the dim bedside lamp, his brows were slightly furrowed, and the corners of his lips drooped naturally. He didn't look comfortable at all. I patted his arm lightly, wanting him to lie down to sleep. David opened his eyes, and very naturally touched my forehead. "What is it? Need water?" A cup that was neither too hot nor too cold was put to my lips. He tucked a pillow behind my back. "Lean back. It's comfier." The doctor came. "It's hypoglycemia from irregular eating, and you've got a slight fever. No need to take medicine yet." My nose stung, my mouth opened. But besides, thank you, I didn't know what else to say. Ever since I left the small town and left Grandma, no one had cared for me like this. After so long, I'd finally found the feeling of home again. After that night, David moved straight into my place. He said he wanted to supervise me, eat well, sleep well. That day he brought over a few pieces of clothing, the next day he moved over his computer. There were even a few mornings when his secretary brought documents directly to my door. Usually David looked a bit lazy. But once he started working, he became a completely different person. His well-proportioned body leaned forward slightly, the sleeves of his light gray shirt rolled to his forearms, a fountain pen between his long fingers. Sunlight slanted in from outside, falling across the sharp lines of his side profile, half his shadow was cast on the wall. When the person on the phone finished reporting, David's magnetic voice carried a deep seriousness. Don't make this mistake again. Send me another version before you get off work. He hung up and turned a page. With the soft swish of pages turning, David didn't even lift his head as he said, "You were peeking at me." I scrambled to lower my head, my face burning, my heart pounding so hard it shook my whole chest. I had only wanted to rest my eyes from the embroidery. How did I end up spacing out like that? You don't have to blame yourself. If I can make you look, I'm pretty happy. When he said that, my heart skipped a beat. You're busy, I'll go back to the bedroom and rest. David watched me flee in a panic, and his smile went all the way to his eyes. When the knocking sounded, I shoved my things into the wardrobe. David walked in with a serious face, went straight to the wardrobe, and took out the half-finished landscape embroidery. I lowered my head, a little ashamed. With David living here, and him always telling me to sleep on time, I always felt like I didn't have enough time. This competition was such a rare opportunity, I didn't want to miss it. So I could only wait for David to fall asleep and then secretly work overtime. I'd even tried to hint at dinner that my condition was almost better, and he could go. David immediately put on a shameless look, pretending he hadn't heard a thing, and even scooped me another half bowl of porridge. I looked down at my toes and lowered my voice. I'm just afraid I won't make it in time. David, holding the embroidery piece, was so angry he was breathing hard. In the end, powerless and helpless, he said, "You're such a stubborn cow." He'd said that before. Back when he dropped out of nowhere and scared the punks off for me, he'd seen that crumpled, hard-earned 10 yuan note in my hand that I was willing to risk my life to protect, and he'd been so angry he laughed. This? Maya. This is worth it? David was a privileged young master from the big city, he didn't get it. That money was what Grandma had earned, staying up late, bent over in the dim little light, sewing stitch by stitch while I slept. When I left in the morning and couldn't refuse her anymore, Grandma insisted on giving it to me so I could buy milk tea. If other little girls have it, my Ame has to have it too. The money in my palm had been soaked by sweat until it was sticky. My voice had been extra firm. It's worth it. David had been so exasperated he waved his hand and didn't bother arguing with me. Fine, fine. Little stubborn cow, where's your house? I'll walk you home. In the end, I used half of that 10 yuan to buy 2 bottles of fizzy drink. One for David, one for me. Under David's helpless gaze, I said softly, "You said I was stubborn a long time ago." David suddenly changed his tone. "Oh? And after all this time you still remember? Then do you remember what I said this morning?" David put the embroidery aside and walked toward me step by step. Behind me was the bed, I had nowhere to go. David's burning gaze never left me. "Maya, are you willing to be seduced by me? Or, are you willing to let me be your boyfriend?" The air began to grow thin and hot. I was finding it a little hard to breathe. How could I not feel anything? He was clearly a young master of the Arnold family, used to clothes handed to him and meals ready on the table. Yet he chose to live in this tiny apartment, making sure I ate, making sure I slept, taking care of me in every little way. His mouth was always saying evil things, but in everything he did, he tiptoed around my sensitive, fragile thoughts. What's more, back when we were young, walking home together in that sunset, I had already traced his silhouette with my eyes. It was just that later, the goodbye came too fast. All the unsaid feelings were buried in youth. David's dark eyes were full of me. My heart sped all the way up to its limit and then slowly calmed again. I heard my own voice. It sounded far away, but also very clear. "David, you really are handsome." David's pretty peach blossom eyes curved into a crescent. Then the kiss came like a wave. "Maya." David's low, husky voice, mixed with scorching breath, spilled over the curve of my ear. "You can't be fed too full at once. If it comes too easily, you won't treasure it." After trying several times, I still decided to use the Suzhou embroidery double-sided technique. On one piece of base fabric, every stitch had to form the same pattern, the same colors, on both sides. Compared with single-sided embroidery, double-sided embroidery demanded that both sides be equally neat and even. It was the hard part. And the highlight. When I got the call from my mother, I was still working late in the studio. Maya, what temper are you throwing? Hurry back. Jeremy is already at home waiting for you. What had to come, would never be escaped. After I hung up, I first sent David a message. I'm working late tonight, won't eat together. David replied in seconds. An emoji, a little dog that was angry. Right after that. Had enough last night? Got it so you don't cherish it, huh? Maya, can you still count how many times you've stood me up? Looking at the messages, my face grew hotter. Last night David had come back after a week-long business trip. It was the first time since we'd started dating that we'd been apart so long. I turned off my phone, and the warmth on my cheeks slowly faded. At first, Jeremy didn't think much of it. He just thought Maya was having another little mood. Give her a few days of cold and she'd be fine. 1 week, 2 weeks, a month went by. Maya still hadn't contacted him. The project was on a tight schedule, and Jeremy had been working overtime for days. Annie cooked millet porridge herself and brought it to him. He drank 2 sips and didn't touch it again. It just didn't taste right. A vague uneasiness rose in Jeremy's heart, but he didn't think deeper. After he finished dealing with another pile of work, Jeremy slumped in his chair, exhausted. In his mind, Maya's pale face floated up. He couldn't shake it. There was always a quiet strength about Maya. As long as she was beside him, his fatigue would just melt away. Jeremy pinched the bridge of his nose and had to admit. He missed Maya. He missed her warm, stomach-soothing porridge. He missed her soft reminders to take care of his health. He missed how, even if she did nothing at all, just sitting quietly next to him was good enough. Women, after all, needed coaxing. Since Maya wouldn't come to him, he would go to her. When Jeremy rushed to the riverside villa and saw the clean, empty rooms, his heart dropped half a beat. Maya really seemed to have left. In such a big house, he couldn't find even the faintest trace of her. Jeremy forced down the panic in his chest and dialed Maya's number. Couldn't get through. His WeChat messages wouldn't go through either. Jeremy looked at the spotless living room, and the small key lying on the table, and with a loud crash. The key flew from his hand, and the crystal lamp overhead shattered all over the floor. That was when Maya's mother called. Jeremy, you and Maya haven't come home for dinner in so long. Are you free these days? Maya's mom almost never called him. It probably meant the company was short on funds again, or she had her eye on another piece of land. Mom, I'm free tomorrow night. It's just that Maya seems to still be mad at me. Driving back to the Keller family, Jeremy was still thinking. When it came to Annie, he had indeed done some things wrong. But now that he'd firmly taken the President Anderson's seat, Annie no longer had any real value to him. As long as Maya would lower her head just a little, he could take a step back for her too. Give Annie some money and send her away, problem solved. When Maya got back to the Keller family, Jeremy was already sitting on the sofa, and Maya's mom was there fawning awkwardly. Maybe because they hadn't seen each other in a long time, when he looked up, Jeremy felt like Maya was a different person. The usual quiet elegance now had a bit of brightness in it. Every move she made was especially attractive. My mother's sharp voice was full of blame. You're engaged, you can't just storm out of the house every time. Jeremy couldn't find you, he was so worried. Jeremy was sitting leisurely on the sofa drinking tea. I smiled slightly and met my mother's eyes. Everything Jeremy gave me, I've already given back to him. After I returned to the Keller family, all the expenses for living and school have already been transferred to your card. I don't know the Keller family, and I don't know Jeremy. My gaze moved past my mother and landed on Jeremy. He wasn't as relaxed as he had been, his face was a bit green. So, I will not be marrying Jeremy. No. I don't agree. Jeremy clenched his fists and shot up from the sofa. In a few strides he was in front of me, speaking in a rush. Maya, I'll take that as you talking out of anger. Annie has already left, and I've already told the family to start preparing our wedding. You come back with me and I'll introduce you to everyone right away. All the indifference from everyone, all of Annie's provocation, every single grievance. So Jeremy had known all along. He had just chosen to ignore it. It was all in the past now. Back when I couldn't fit into that strange city and was being pushed out by my own family, Jeremy really had warmed me. My gratitude back then was real, my liking was real, the hurt and humiliation were real. And now, my letting go was also real. Jeremy, let's part on good terms. When I turned to leave, Jeremy grabbed my wrist. I struggled to pull away, but the strength in his hand was frightening. Uncle, you're going to scare my girlfriend like that. David yanked me straight into his arms. His tone was still lazy, but there was a cutting coldness in his eyes. Jeremy looked at David, then at me. In those bloodshot eyes, a feral smile spread. Maya, so that's why you won't marry me. Turns out you've climbed onto another higher branch. David's fist flew before I even reacted. Jeremy fell back onto the sofa, blood smearing at the corner of his mouth. Watch your mouth. I've been wanting to hit you for a long time. My mother shrank in the corner, not daring to make a sound. What I owed her and the Keller family, I'd already repaid. That shallow mother-daughter bond was, in the end, cut. As David held me and walked out, Jeremy called out from behind, unwilling to let it go. Maya, you really think David is a good guy? He already played a girl to death when he was in middle school. If you don't believe me, ask him. David was like a lion whose tail had been stepped on. He rushed at Jeremy full of killing intent. No one could stop him. By the time the ambulance arrived, Jeremy was already lying in a pool of blood. Before I was brought back to the Keller family, I had lived with Grandma in a water town in Jiangnan. Blue brick, gray tiles, hills behind, rivers beside. Every day I carried the embroidered school bag Grandma made for me and went to school. After school I would go wading in the creek with my little friends, catching crabs. David was a transfer student who came to our school in middle school. A child from the big city, a proud young master of a rich family. He didn't fit our small town at all. Maybe it was the lack of adjustment. David was either sleeping on his desk every day or staring out of the window without moving. He always looked gloomy. I was the class study monitor. David always turned his homework in last, or simply didn't do it. I had no choice but to pluck up my courage and wake him. David's head jerked up from his arms. He was panting hard, face pale, big drops of sweat rolling down his forehead. He looked completely lost and terrified. I'd never seen anything like it, so I hurriedly took 2 steps back. David, are you okay? He ignored me, gave me a cold look, and lay back down on the desk. Then, your homework still isn't in. My voice was so small only I could hear it. There was no reply for a long time. When class was about to start, I went back to my own seat. I took out the candies I'd treasured for so long and put them on David's desk, and left a handkerchief for him to wipe his sweat. I'd heard from the auntie next door that people with low blood sugar were like that. Only after I was taken back by the Keller family did I wake up from dreams again and again. And realize, it hadn't been low blood sugar. He'd been having nightmares. Only people who are really sad have nightmares all the time. Maybe it was the candy and the handkerchief that worked. David's attitude toward me got better. When I went to ask him for homework again, he could at least write a few answers so I could turn it in on time. Later there were rumors among our classmates. They said David had killed someone in his previous school. That he'd only transferred to our school because he couldn't stay there anymore. The rumors got more and more outrageous. When classmates passed by him, they would mutter and turn back to look at him a few times. When I found David, he was standing by the railing on the rooftop. The wind was so strong. He looked like a fragile butterfly that would fall with a light touch. I called out, David. The wind blew into my mouth. He turned to look at me. Do you want me to bring you lunch? After that, we gradually got familiar. He asked me, why did you come up to the rooftop to find me that day? I said, the homeroom teacher told me to take care of the new student. You heard what everyone said. You're not afraid of me. I'm not. I believe you. Rumors are always ridiculous. Some even said David had eaten people. My belief in David was a little inexplicable. Maybe it was because, though he looked fierce, he never bullied the weak. Or maybe because when he bumped into someone by accident, he would bow his head and say sorry. Or maybe because he would always quietly take out the trash. The most direct reason was probably this: my intuition told me that a face that good-looking wouldn't do bad things. David's injuries weren't serious. The doctor just treated and dressed the wounds. In the hospital corridor, he tugged at my sleeve. The eyes that had once shone so brightly now looked a little lost. Maya, don't you have anything to ask me? I nodded. Are you hungry? David burst out laughing and buried his head in the crook of my neck, like an obedient big puppy. I felt a cool dampness on my neck. He was crying. Maya, I'm hungry. Okay. Let's go home and eat. It was an old, almost cliché story. A boy rejected a girl's confession. The girl turned around and jumped from the 6th floor of the mall. A lively, breathing girl, in an instant, became a body lying in the middle of blood. Spreading even faster than blood and air. Were those blade-like rumors? No one bothered with the real reason she jumped. The girl had been affected by her original family and already had severe depression. In her diary she'd written again and again, once you die there's no more pain. Yes, the pain would only be left to the living. David, just a teenaged middle schooler, faced with classmates who ignored the facts and pinned the blame on him, had tried to fight back, tried to lay out the facts and talk reason. But the girl's pale, blood-stained face in that pool of red had shown up in his dreams over and over again. What he'd said had only been one ordinary sentence, one he could have said to any classmate. Sorry, I don't like you that way. Day and night, everywhere, all he heard was condemnation. No one cared about the truth. They only wanted to believe what they wanted to believe. A teenage boy got a girl pregnant and refused to take responsibility. The girl had nowhere to cry to, so she jumped. That was the version of the story they nailed to David. That was how it ended. David was on the verge of collapse. Under the arrangement of the Arnold family, he transferred to our little town school to recuperate. At night, when I was curled up against David's chest and was about to fall asleep, a faint voice came. Maya, thank you for saving me. In those days when he was falling into a bottomless pit, Maya was like sunlight at 10 in the morning. Warm and gentle. She seeped little by little into David's life and pulled him out of the abyss. Maya lifted her fair, serene face, her tone even and firm. I believe you. And David picked up the courage again to stand in the sun and embrace this world. Maya, I love you so much. Half asleep, I still answered him. I love you too. Jeremy later asked to see me one more time. His injuries were bad. When he was getting a blood transfusion, the Anderson family discovered something. Jeremy's blood type didn't match. The DNA test proved Jeremy was not old Master Anderson's son. In one night, he went from the prideful CEO of Anderson Group to a bastard everyone spat on. It drew countless sighs. The day he was discharged, I still went to see him. Jeremy had always been thin, now he was skin and bones. His face was ghastly pale, his hair messy. In those eyes that used to be confident there was only exhaustion. Why did you save me that day? That day at the Keller family, David had gone crazy, every punch landing solidly on Jeremy. In the end I really couldn't stop him, so I stepped in front of Jeremy and called an ambulance. I didn't want David to get into trouble. The last glimmer in Jeremy's eyes faded. He lowered his head and smiled. I looked at him calmly and went on, and I didn't want you to get into trouble either. When I was being pushed away by the Keller family, I was really grateful to you. At the end, Jeremy turned his stiff neck away. On the white quilt, teardrops splashed like tiny flowers. When I was about to leave, Jeremy called after me with a hoarse voice. Maya, I'm sorry. I loved you very much. Take care, Jeremy. All the hard work finally paid off. My double-sided embroidered landscape piece won first prize in the competition. The day I held the trophy, I went back to that little town and set it in front of Grandma's grave. Grandma, you were right. I really am doing better and better. Missing her so much, I let it ride on the wind, Grandma would get it. 2 months later, David took me to meet his parents. On the way there, I was nervous and a little scared. Do your parents care about family background? Families that prominent always care about being equal in status. David glanced at me, the corners of his lips lifting in a pretty arc. Miss Keller, you've already won a national prize, still so modest. Don't worry. You're more than good enough for me. The atmosphere was much friendlier than I'd imagined. David's dad personally cooked to welcome me. David's mom looked at her son with dislike and waved him away. Go to the kitchen and help. Don't stay here getting in the way of what I want to say to her. In the big living room, David's mom took my hand, her face full of warmth. Maya, David has told us about you long ago. He said Maya is such a good girl. So elegant, so quiet, so pretty, and there's this toughness in you. When he was in his senior year of high school, he called me and said he wanted to apply to the same university as you, and then confess to you. As she spoke, David's mom's voice got nasal, and tears welled up in her gentle eyes. But that was when they suddenly found something in my stomach. I had to have a major surgery. He rushed back in a hurry. By the time I was fully recovered and he went back to look for you, it seemed like everything was already too late, and he couldn't bear to disturb you. The day you got engaged, he was lying on the balcony crying so hard. He said the girl he loved was going to marry someone else. At the end, David's mom wiped her tears and smiled softly. Thank goodness, in the end the two of you still came together. Otherwise I'd have blamed myself for life. Dinner went very smoothly. David's dad kept telling me to eat more, and David's mom kept putting food in my bowl. After dinner, David took me out for a walk. The two of us held hands and walked along the ginkgo-lined path. I sped up a few steps and stood in front of him. David, when did you start liking me? He put his hands in his pockets and pretended to think. That's a long story. I can't finish it today. I plucked a leaf from his hair and smiled knowingly. It's okay. Tell it slowly. We've got plenty of time.